Welcome to Midlife Matters. I'm Marie, and each week I'm joined by my friends Julie and Mindy to talk about all the topics keeping women in the middle years up at night. Today we're talking about what scares us. Join us as we share our silly and serious fears in many areas of life. And then ask yourself, what are you afraid of? Let's get started. Listeners, recently on a previous episode, I made a Freudian slip, and instead of asking, what are you a fan of, I said, what are you afraid of? And while it was funny at the time, it also sparked a topic idea for us. What are we afraid of? Fear tends to creep into even the most seemingly simple of situations. How do we approach life choosing to face our fears head on? How can we be brave in everyday scenarios? Today, we're going to approach this topic with a sense of humor and hopefully offer a little encouragement along the way. And nobody really likes to admit their fears. It's like, I want to hear what you guys are afraid of, but I don't necessarily like to tell other people what I'm afraid of. How do you guys feel about this?
Same.
Same.
Yeah. I know when I was going through my list of the things that I'm afraid of, I'm plenty happy to talk about ticks, but I don't want to talk about like the deep stuff. But I can't.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. If we stay shallow and surface, I mean, it's laughing at myself about I'll call them silly fears. But man, don't go too deep because it hurts.
Right.
A little scary.
It's vulnerable to admit what you're afraid of. So yeah. Well, let's start out with the more superficial ones. Okay. So the first one we're going to start out with is, what are you afraid of in the kitchen? And I'll go first. This is a silly one. But I am afraid of making steak. And Steve doesn't grill them either. Like, we're both kind of afraid of steaks because they're like a big investment when you buy them. And then if you don't really know how to cook them, on the couple occasions that we've overcooked and then they're not even good. I don't know what kind of steak to buy. Like, I look at the meat and I'm like, I don't know what cut is even good. What's tender? Like, the whole steak thing is just beyond my comprehension. So I'm afraid of steak. I like to eat it.
Okay.
The good news about steak, though, is that it can be undercooked and you're still safe.
True.
Like cooking chicken, you're either good or you're not.
Not so good.
I think, though, novices tend to overcook steak. So because we don't cook it very often, it usually always is like shoe leather. So yeah, I'm afraid of buying steak, cooking it, never serve it to anybody because I have no idea what I'm doing.
That's awesome, Marie. Well, I'll quickly follow that up with, I'm obviously afraid of like salmonella or poisoning somebody or something because I cannot wash my hands enough or wipe my counters down with my favorite Clorox wet wipes enough. And I realize it's because I don't trust anybody. If you have touched eggshells, which I know people are touching eggshells and then touching handles. Yeah. And I'm trying not to be a germaphobe, but the kitchen, I'm afraid of poison, bacteria.
This is shocking to me, seeing as just a few weeks ago you admitted to sitting on a toilet in a public place.
I do. Now, I really look it over, okay? Like, I'm not just blindly sitting in faith.
You're never going to live that down, Mindy.
Listen, there's different body parts touching, okay?
Right,
I'm just going to leave that there.
You're not rubbing your butt on the kitchen handle.
Somehow I can see one of my boys doing that. Why is that?
I know. They have an itch, and that seems like a good place to scratch it.
For me, as I didn't grow up with a ton of cooking happening at all in my house. And so coming into my marriage, I literally knew nothing. And I mean, I remember meeting with one of Nathan's sisters who, I mean, she should be a chef. And she taught me a bunch of different ways to cook chicken and helped me get over my fear of chicken. And I mean, we lived off of tuna helper and canned chicken helper for a long time because I was terrified of being in the kitchen. And now I'm fine. I am past that hump. I can cook things. I can read a recipe. I'm feeding my family. They're all alive. Nathan travels, so I am doing the cooking and keeping everyone alive. But I feel like I still have like this imposter syndrome kind of going on, that when people come over and I feed them, that they're gonna know that I don't know what I'm doing, even though I know what I'm doing. So that's interesting. And then, we just celebrated Thanksgiving a couple weeks ago, and we have always gone to Tampa. We've stayed home a couple years, but for the most part, we go to Tampa and my family cooks. And since our oldest is going to be going away to college next year, we kind of said, maybe this is our last year going to Tampa, because when she comes home from college, she's going to want to come home and not hop in a car for 10 hours. And so I've thought, you know what, that might really work out well, because then we can start like learning how to do a Thanksgiving meal, because I want to launch my kids, even my son, knowing how to make side dishes and a turkey and all the fixings and all the things. So, I'm not afraid of doing Thanksgiving because I have done it a couple times, but it's daunting. It's daunting.
It is. Oh, it is. I agree with you on all of those things. Oh,
yeah. I was thinking probably the biggest, I don't know if it's the biggest fear that people have in the kitchen, but I feel like it's probably a common fear is just, am I a good enough cook? Like, okay, I'm a good enough cook to feed my family. Am I a good enough cook to have company over? I feel like those are two different levels. And I feel like we can get intimidated and think, well, sure, my family doesn't mind my cooking, but could I serve it to other people?
Right.
I always feel like, if we have company over all the time. And so we are always kind of in the kitchen and cooking and chopping and doing all the things. And I've just figured a lot of it out as I go. And I'm always afraid that when there's people in my home in the kitchen kind of watching, that they are going to think, why does she cut her blah, blah, blah like that? Why does she cut her green onions that way, or her peppers or her tomatoes? Like, that's not the way you do it. And they're all, even though it's the way I've just figured it out, that they're going to be like, that's not the way you do it. And then they'll know that I'm a fake.
That you're
an imposter.
I'm an imposter.
A lot to be afraid of in the kitchen.
I still have another one.
Okay.
I mean, we haven't listed physical harm or burning the house down, which I can very much testify. I'm afraid of both of those things because when I was a newlywed, I did almost burn the house down trying to cook bacon in the oven on a flat pan. All right.
That's not
It
good.
was bad. And I called my mother, and there's fire coming out, flames.
And who even remembers in the moment? How do you stop a grease fire? Don't use water. You got to throw like flour or something.
Oh, yeah. She told me. So I opened up my hunter green canister and I doused it with flour. And then, being the newlywed that I was, I vacuumed all that up with our vacuum cleaner we'd just gotten for our wedding, which killed that.
Yuck. And plus that would smell like bacon every time you washed. If it survived, every time you vacuumed another room, you'd be spreading that bacon smell.
I killed the vacuum cleaner, cleaning up the flour from the fire from the grease on the bacon on the flat pan.
Goodness.
Don't do that.
No.
Okay. I'm also afraid of bodily injury because you're using sharp things in the kitchen. And I have scars. The Thanksgiving that my turkey didn't cook, I sliced 3 fingers open on a green bean can lid and had to get glued back together. So there's that. I mean, the fact that I'm still alive, the house hasn't burned down. I mean, these are all good things. But yeah, I'm scared of my kitchen.
Oh, all right. Well, let's move on to running errands. And when I saw this one, I said to Mindy, why did you put this one, Mindy? Like, what are you afraid of for running errands? I was thinking, is she afraid of getting carjacked? Like, what is she afraid of? So why don't you tell listeners what you are afraid of running errands?
Okay. I've told you guys, like, it's a beautiful thing to live in a small town. Also, you're going to see people every single place that you go, which is really precious. But if you happen to not be feeling good, or if you have talked too much, or you're overstimulated and you're just like, okay, I look like I'm a homeless person, but I just need to run in for that one thing. I get afraid I'm going to see somebody that I know. I mean, surely you guys have been in that situation. You're like, please just don't let me see anybody I know at this moment.
Right.
And then you do.
I know. That's inevitable. If you were looking nice, you'd see nobody that you knew.
It's so true. I try to go to as many places as possible when I'm looking good.
Yeah. Well, I had to do a bunch of errands yesterday, like a lot. And I would say that, and this isn't necessarily totally with just running errands, but just with shopping in general, I am afraid of not getting the best deal. So we are trying to buy a big TV for our bonus room because we moved and now we can get a bigger TV, and I kind of want that to be the main one. And so it was Black Friday weekend. Perfect. I'm ashamed to admit how much time I spent online comparing TV specs and reviews. And I texted my brother-in-law and asked Steve to go with me to look, and I looked at Jennifer's brand of TV when I went over to your house on Sunday. I'm like, I've got to gather all the information I can possibly, because I can't make a mistake buying this big TV. Then yesterday morning, it was the last day of Black Friday, and I tend to make all my decisions at the last moment. I just keep saying, well, there's still a little more time. So I went to 3 different stores and compared every screen in person and finally decided. And so, yes, I am afraid of not getting the best deal. And I'll do this with, smaller items too. Like Abigail told me that I must update my jeans. Oh my goodness. First of all, please don't make me update my jeans. Make me update my shirts. I don't want to update my jeans. But I have to try on, 20 different pairs because I don't know which one's I want to get the best one, so I don't know. I can just go down a rabbit hole, and sometimes I don't even want to start the shopping process.
And skinny jeans are out, apparently, which is really sad.
No, they're not. They're not out. I refuse.
I know. I'm all for flattery, wearing what is flattering, but I have heard the same thing, that it's time to do a jean update as well.
So along with not making a mistake, I don't want to waste money. And so the bigger the price, the more concerned I am. So I'm not buying furniture for this for a long time because I don't want to waste money or make a mistake.
True.
Like, I'm going to be shopping for a new vehicle for probably 2 to 3 years because I don't know what to go to next after a minivan. And Marie, I'm doing all the research.
Mm-hmm.
I have driven multiple vehicles. I mean, it's ridiculous. And then even this morning, I thought I had landed on one. I told Bryce, I'm rethinking that. So
yes. All right.
Sad.
All right, Jennifer, what are you afraid of when you run errands?
I have nothing. I have nothing.
You just love to get out there in the world and you're afraid of nothing.
I know. I don't love running errands. I don't, but I have no fears surrounding it. But I did have a fear that I thought I would talk about it doesn't fall into any of these categories.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a new fear that I didn't really know that I had. So my husband just started doing cold plunges in our pool, because our pool is 50 degrees. And yes, it's accurate because we measured it. And he wanted me to join him the other day. And so we, put on I had on like little bike shorts and a swimsuit top and a tank top. And I could not get in.
No,
I realized I don't know if it's a fear or if it's a loathe. I hate being cold. I hate it. And I've got circulation issues and I got Raynaud's and all the things, and I'm always cold. And if I have a threshold of if I get too cold, I've got to get in a bath to reset everything because I'll never warm up. And so I could not get in the pool, and he kept holding my hand going, okay, 1, 2, 3, we're going to run in. We're going to run in together. We'll do this together. I'm right with you. And our daughter was going to sit there with the phone with the stopwatch because we were going to try and do 4 minutes. I could not get in. And I kind of started crying. I'm like, what is wrong with me that I can't just do this? And I'm like, I literally, and maybe it was because this podcast was on my mind, but I'm like, I'm so afraid to get in. I'm so afraid to feel this feeling that I know is going to shock the, living daylights out of me. And so finally I did it. And I got in and I couldn't go in past my waist. And I just stood there like paralyzed in the pool, not being able to breathe. It was as bad as I expected it would be. And so then we did 4 minutes and we got out. And then I was disappointed in myself that I didn't do the full cold plunge, because then I saw, okay, like my lower half really isn't that cold standing out here in 50-degree weather and with 50-degree water on me. So then Nathan was like, okay, well, I'll do it again. And let's do it. We'll do it. And so I had to muster up the courage again. And we went running into the pool and I sunk, to my shoulders, and I could not breathe. It was the craziest, most awful thing ever. And I only lasted 30 seconds before I bolted out of the pool. But I realized it was like a fear. It was a So then I'm like, what's wrong with me? So many people around the world are doing this right now. And it's like such a trend, but I could not get myself to do it. But now it's a challenge and I'm determined. But I might need to wait till
Ooh.
like the other side of winter when it's starting to warm up because it's only going to get colder.
Oh, I wouldn't be
It was
able to
bad.
jump in either, Jennifer.
It was bad. It was very bad. Yeah.
I don't even like to get in the ocean if the air is cold.
No, me too.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even like 75 and below kind
No.
of situations.
Uh-uh.
And it was 50. Oh, it's brutal.
Right. I'm right there with you, Jennifer. And I know you grew up in Florida. So there's that. I am too afraid of being cold. And I can't how many times I have thanked my husband for moving me back to Georgia because I don't like the cold. I think it's okay, but I am afraid of it.
Mhm.
So I have to make myself get outside and go for walks during the winter. You know, I'm like, you're not going to die. And I walked when I lived in Pennsylvania and I felt like I was facing a fear there.
It's hard to be cold. Yeah. All right. Let's talk about other fears that we have driving. Okay. I hate parking. I hate parking. I cannot parallel park. I parallel parked for my driver's license when I was 16, and I think that's the last time I ever parallel parked. Like, literally, if you said you have to go to downtown Nashville and parallel park, I would have to get out on the street and look for a man that looked competent and pay him like $20 to parallel park my car because I wouldn't be able to do it.
Oh, Marie, listen, I have learned so much from you as a mother. I would love to teach you how to parallel park. I can help you with that.
Oh, so parking is my biggest driving fear. I hate parking.
Oh my goodness.
Mine is probably
that's
similar
yeah.
to what y'all were talking about with the errands. I take Penny to school in the mornings. We have to leave by like 7:05. And then I usually come straight home and then it's time to take Thad to school. I'm not in my real pants yet. I'm not in my real clothes. And
Yeah.
so every time we leave the house, every time I think something's going to happen one day. Something's going to happen. I'm going to have to get out of this car and people are going to have to see what I'm wearing. And wouldn't you know, it was like the spring of this year. I was taking my son to school and this big box truck rammed into me. And I know, and it hit the front left of my car and I couldn't open my door. I had to climb out the window or the passenger side to get out. And I was wearing the schleppiest pajama outfit. And when he hit me, I spilled all my coffee in my lap because I carry a mug. And I mean, wouldn't you know, like 5 minutes later, someone texted me and they were like, "Are you okay? I saw you on the side of the road." And I'm like, of course, I've said this every time. And it happened. It happened that I was on the side of a very busy road in our town wearing the worst possible of outfits.
With coffee spilled on
With
it.
coffee all brown all down the front of it. It was terrible. It was terrible.
Oh my goodness. Oh
But
my
I'm still
goodness.
doing it. So clearly it wasn't something I was all that afraid of, or at least I conquered the fear because I'm still doing it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I have to say, I have had to be brave in this category in the sense that I used to be afraid of driving really long distances alone. And when I tackled that, like when we Pennsylvania and Abby was in Tennessee, I was determined to still be able to visit her. And I knew couldn't wait for Bryce to be able to get off work and the boys to get out of school to go see. And so the first time I did it, I was really nervous, you know, stops and gas and food and just the whole bit. The more I did it, the more I found I loved it. I loved driving long distances alone. And I was patting myself on the back. I was like, you did it. Like you drove a long way all by yourself. Way to go. But I mean, even every time I go to a big city, it could be daunting to face traffic or navigating like different, very large cities and their traffic patterns and their weird one-way streets and things like that. But try to be brave in that category. And now I see it as a challenge to be able to tackle it and come away whole and in one piece. And
Yeah. All right. Fears around podcasting. Now, Mindy, you wrote this, so you must have some fears around podcasting. So why don't you enlighten us?
well, don't you, Marie? I mean, I feel like anytime you put a mic on yourself, you put yourself in a place of vulnerability,
Mm-hmm.
opening yourself up, hoping you're not hurting feelings, hoping you don't say the wrong thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's just so much. Like, I don't want to be annoying. You and I have talked about that with the podcast. You're like, we each find our own voices annoying. So I don't want to like be on here and annoy people. Also, I have to put a mic on when I teach classes at the gym. And I'm just going to put these two in the same category. It's just a very vulnerable place to be, to put a mic on. So it just kind of surprised me when I thought about, I put a mic on for multiple things during my week and I'm uncomfortable. It makes me uncomfortable. So I am being brave by continuing to put myself out there.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say my biggest fear is that we're boring people. Like, but then I think, you know what? The beauty of podcasts is if you're bored, you don't have to listen. Nobody's making you listen. So if you're still pushing play, then you must not be that bored. But I do think in the back of your mind, you're like, is this even something that anyone would possibly be interested in talking about? And then we'll get like a bunch of messages like, oh, I totally related to that. So sometimes the most boring topics are the ones we get the most input about.
Exactly. I know.
What are your fears, Jennifer? We're asking you to come on just on a whim, bare your soul.
Tell us.
Well, I mean, you girls know I did have a podcast with a friend for about 4 years, and it was a mom podcast when our kids were a little bit younger, and I think I really loved it, and I've loved you guys asking me to come back on, temporarily and fill in, and I would say though, probably what I'm always, I don't know if I'm afraid of it, but just aware and nervous about is sharing too much. Especially with mom stuff being the topic and you're talking about your children. There have been a few times where in my previous podcast where like my daughter would hear something and say, you told them that? And, then I feel terrible. And will she remember that? Will that embarrass her? And so probably just that, and I know it's tricky. Like when your kids are young, it's one thing to have them throw a fit or to color on your walls or to throw their food across the room. Like everyone's kids are doing that. But when they're older, it's harder stuff that is the hard stuff that we're facing. And it's also their stories that, are being lived out. And it's not as easy to share those things, not just publicly in a podcast, but with people, with friends, because you're sharing someone else's personal business. So I just think, just sharing too much, being aware and, at the same time, you're wanting to be vulnerable and real on this type of platform, but also, pay respects to the people who you're talking about at the same time.
Yeah, there's definitely a fine line. The nice thing about it is it's not live. And a lot of times we go ahead and we're like, hey, take that part out. Like, and that's totally fine.
Yeah,
it's true. And I appreciate that you said that, Jennifer, about, like as your kids get older, it's their story. And so that's why this tends to be such a lonely time in life for moms, because you can't talk about everything. You can't share everything. And so we do our best, but it's a lonelier place to be.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's actually easier to share it with strangers because they don't actually know your kids and they're not really going to come across your kids. So you can kind of say it and then there's no like, oh, well, I know her parenting, so that's why they turned out like that. Or, I've seen that kid at church and she doesn't know what he's doing behind her back or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like strangers are sometimes easier to talk to.
Exactly.
Thank you, listeners.
If you do know our kids, don't even tell us that you know them.
Oh, man.
All right. Well, what are you afraid of with your friends? Now we're starting to get into like deeper topics. Like, what are you afraid of with your friends? I feel like I am kind of afraid of like, am I too much? Am I too little? Like, okay, maybe I'm too much. Like, have you ever gotten home from a group gathering and you're like, oh my goodness, did I hijack the conversation? Why did I talk so much? Why did I say that? Like all that. So that's under the category of too much. And then I think, well, am I too little? I find out, oh, a friend was going through this and I didn't even know. Or, oh, other friends did X, Y, and Z for them. I never even thought about that. Like, like sometimes you think you're too little. And so that's kind of a fine line to balance.
Yeah, that's good. Right when you said that, when you moved to this next category, my stomach jumped a little bit. Like,
Oh,
oh,
Yeah.
I think it's just scary to even thinking about this topic. But like for me, I really spent a lot of time thinking about this one. And I've learned over the years. So I was an only child, and right then and there, I didn't have any siblings to share my age group space with, and friends were really important to me growing up. And then my parents ended up divorcing the year after Nathan and I got married. And so then my nuclear family was completely dissolved and gone. And so friends are my family. And people have just always been really important to me. When I look at people that have really big families, their most important people are their families. And then friends, and I'm sure there's very important friends, like for you guys with large families, friends are important as well, but you've got your nuclear family that takes up a chunk of all your people. And, people have always been really important to me. And I've always wanted to love people well and meet people's needs, be community to people. But I was thinking about this and I'm like, I want that for others, but if I'm very honest, I want that for myself. I want to love people well so that they stick around and they don't leave. And I want to be in community, but I also want to stay in community. And so I find that I'm a lot of times, same like you, Marie, questioning my behavior or, how I am as a friend and trying to alter if I'm feeling insecure about it, because I want to make sure that I'm someone that people want to stick around for, because I don't want to lose those friendships. And, in the last decade, I have lost a handful of friends, and it's been very painful. It's been a very painful time in my life to lose a few friendships. And I think with any loss that you experience, once you've experienced that loss, you develop a fear of it happening again. And so, the first friendship that I lost that was very dear to me was about 10 years ago. And it marked me, and it became like, I hesitate to use the word trauma, but it was those same types of grief feeling. So then it became this fear of, I don't want this to happen again. And then when it happened again, it creates this this unhealthy kind of fear. And I just think you have to be real careful of recognizing that a fear is developing out of that loss, and then not making an idol out of that thing that you've lost. Yeah. And then, and when idols can develop, or if you're idolizing, or bad habits can then develop, and clamoring or people pleasing, or, I think it takes a certain level of awareness and processing to be able to work through like a grief, any kind of grief, to be honest, but a grief in that way. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but I was pondering this question quite a bit, and I've realized that over the years, like I'm an only, so I'm like a firstborn, so I have very strong opinions, and I know what I want and all these things, but I have found that over the years, I've really become a lot more go with the flow, especially with friends. If I have a friend who's like, let's get together, I'm just so grateful they want to get together. So whatever they want to do, I'll do. You want to walk together? You want to go to brunch? You want to eat sugar, or you don't want to eat sugar? Whatever, I'll do it. Because I'm just so thankful you want to hang out with me. And a little bit of that could get, people pleasing, so I have to always kind of check myself, like, which scale am I tipping into? Is this healthy? Am I still behaving healthy, or am I starting to clamor a little bit or acting out of fear kind of thing? So that was really a lot.
Good. No, that's good. Thanks for sharing that, because I don't think you're alone in that, Jennifer.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I don't know, friendships do change, and for various reasons. And sometimes it's you, sometimes it's not you. And, but it is, if it causes us to take a look inward to say, was it me? What could I do differently? Do I need to be humbled? And do I need to own up to anything that I've done? Do I need to, press in and have a hard conversation? Then I think anything like that is helpful, as opposed to being defensive and closed off and saying, well, I'm never doing that again. So,
Yeah. No, those are good words of advice. And thank you for being vulnerable.
oh,
Yeah.
thanks. Did I share too much? 'Cause
No,
I'm afraid.
you did not.
I'm just kidding.
No, we can all relate with that. Well, have you guys heard the Taylor Swift song? And one of the main lines is, "It's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me." This is the song that's going through my head when I think about friends, because you guys, we did that whole we've done multiple friendship podcasts. Okay.
Mhm.
So I have been very vulnerable about that. And I've told you my deepest desire right now is to go deeper with people. Well, do you guys know that's my biggest fear, is letting people in? Like, I have developed such a skill set. I'm very, very gracious at getting to know people.
Mhm.
I'm great at surface level conversations. I will meet everybody for the first time and have all those startup conversations. It's really hard for me to be the one to open up and go deeper, because you open yourself up to vulnerability. And I'm realizing, like, okay, I'm telling you, our audience,
Mhm.
I want to go deeper. Am I willing to go deeper? Am I
Mhm.
willing to be the one to open up and be vulnerable and spend the time and the effort and the energy, inviting people into my home, you know, getting past all of those surface level conversations, which you can spend a year doing with
Mhm.
people. Not every friendship needs to go deeper, but
Mhm.
allowing the ones that are willing and,
Mhm.
that we're kind of on the same page, like, okay, go to the next step, go to the next step.
Yeah.
One of our core values at the church that Marie and I go to is being courageously real. And I love that, because I feel like so often, I mean, not all everywhere, but a lot of times, especially in church, there's this kind of buttoned up thing that we have to present, and which is the opposite of what, Jesus is saying, come to me with. But I love that concept of courageously real, like be real and do it with courage, because that's being vulnerable, being authentic, being real, sharing the depths of who you are takes courage. It's
Mhm.
easy to just button up and put on your game face and go about your day with people, but it takes courage to be honest and say, not just this is what I'm struggling with, but this is what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid of, do you like
Yeah.
me? Are you misunderstanding me? Am I misrepresenting myself? Or to
Mhm.
say, how can I be a better friend to you, and really hear what a person has to say and receive it and say, I'm going to really work on doing that better, because what you hear is you suck. And so you want to, but saying
Right.
it, hearing that and saying, I don't, but I do need work here and I'm going to try and do better.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah, this could really be like its own hour episode.
Yeah.
Fears that we have around
Yeah.
friendships. We might have to delve in
Yeah.
deeper.
We've got a few
Yeah.
more categories and
Yeah.
I've got long paragraphs.
We do.
Literally. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about fears that we have at church. This is such a broad category, so we can't cover all the fears we have, but like, what if someone said, "What's your biggest fear about church?" What would you say?
I'm so interested to hear what y'all have to say on this.
All right. Mindy, you want to go first?
You guys. All right. All right. Along with friendships, feeling like being afraid of being misunderstood. Jennifer, I'm glad you used that word. That was one of my key words, being misunderstood. I feel that at church. Whether I say yes to being asked to do something or whether I say no to being asked to do something, I want people to think the best about me. Also, this might seem silly, but also every time I go into church, I'm like trying to focus, and we sit on the front row, and that's a whole nother story why. But we sit on the front row, and I'm literally wrestling with God the whole time I'm there, like to focus on Him, not anything else, not anybody else's problem that I'm worried about, not a friend, not who's behind me, not who's next to me, not what I'm going to, make for lunch. I'm like, I'm so unfocused that I don't want to miss what God's trying to do. And I literally am like, please focus my mind on you. But I'm in a wrestling match mentally every time I'm in church.
Yeah. How about you, Jennifer? What are you afraid about church?
So I had a hard time kind of thinking about an answer for this one, but what it came down to, so we recently switched to a new church about 2.5, maybe almost 3 years ago. And, that in of itself, I wouldn't have said was a fear of switching churches, but now it would be because of just the process of switching to a new church. It was really hard. That process is just never easy, but it was hard. Having God lead us to a different place. My husband was very certain that's what we were doing, and it was hard kind of following that lead, feeling all of my feelings and emotions. And I think stepping into a new place, when we know that we're going to be church attenders that are involved and serving and, definitely all in on the community, it's hard to step into a new place that feels established. Mm-hmm. And I think that was probably a fear of mine, and still could trickle in even 2.5 years later, of where do I fit? Now that we kind of have this like fresh, clean slate, like what ministries would I want to actually step into? What am I good at? Will anybody know that I'm serious? Like, nobody knows me, and you don't know that I love Jesus and I'm, walking in my faith strongly, and I want to be here and serve, and, my giftings and all the things. And so I think it's just not like, it's the fear of like not being known and not knowing if I will be brought in, since everything's already seems to be so established. And of course, I feel like in 2.5 years, that fear has been squelched a little bit, because we have stepped in to some ministries and found community. And, but it had to be very deliberate. We had to be initiators, and we had to dive in on that. But it did take about a year before we were hugging people on Sunday mornings and seeing people we recognized. And so, it can be tricky, but that was probably the thing,
Mm-hmm.
long story short, of what I was most afraid of.
I would say that same thing, because we went to the same church for a really long time, and they knew us from the time our our 3 youngest ones were babies. And that is like something you can never replace. Having changed churches really gives me an empathy for people who move to new places and have to just step in, because I think the biggest fear is, am I going to find my people? Am I going to belong here? Or am I always just going to be one of many? And I don't know how anyone goes into any church nowadays and doesn't have that fear. I mean, I guess if it was a super small church, but we visited a lot of churches, and I had the same fear at every single church. And will I ever be known? Like you said, Jennifer. So yeah, I mean, I think that if people are listening to the podcast and they have that fear about church, maybe fear about visiting for that reason, or they're visiting a new church and they're just fearful if they stay there. Like, I just think that's a very common fear. And, I would say that Mindy, Jennifer, and myself, we all have recently experienced that feeling and still are experiencing that feeling.
Yeah.
And I think it'd be hard too in your situation, Marie, because like you said, your children grew up in one place, and then now you're at a different place where, there's so many people who don't even know you have kids. It's like this crucial
because they don't go to, because they're in college. Yeah.
Right. And so it's you and Steve on most Sunday mornings, because your kids are all either married or at school. And so that would feel like a hole, like, nobody around me even knows, It is tricky, but it's, the thing is though, it's hard, it's tricky. And sometimes it can even be messy, but we've got to lean in, and we've got to step out in faith and in courage and plug in and do it anyways. I was watching, so my son and I are watching this show, Young Sheldon. Have y'all watched that yet?
Oh,
I've seen a couple episodes.
It's the main character of Big Bang Theory, Sheldon. And so, which I haven't watched, but it's him as a kid. So they go kind of back in time to like the 80s, and it's him as a kid, or 90s, I'm not sure. And there's this one scene, because he's a genius. He's going off to college and he's 11. And so he and his twin sister are laying in their room together. And I went back I was watching with my son and daughter, and then I'm like, oh my gosh, that was so profound. And so I rewound it and I videotaped it and I have it in my camera roll because she says to him, like, I know how you're feeling. And he says, no, you don't. How could you? Because he was going to college, not her. And he was 11. They're both 11. And she said, yes, I do. And she said, you're scared. You're afraid. You don't know what's going to happen. And you're afraid it's all going to change and be different. And he sits up and he goes, how could you know that? And she said, because I'm feeling it too, you idiot. And he was like, I take comfort in knowing that you feel that way. And then he says, so what do we do about this? And she goes, something like, we acknowledge that we're scared and we do it anyway. And I was like, I love that. We acknowledge that we're scared and we do it anyway. And I stopped it and I recorded it. Then I stopped it again. I told my kids, this is what we do in life is we do it scared. We just do it scared. Like you're going to feel scared, but you can't wait for that fear to just pass over. You just do it scared. And sometimes you just got to fake it till you make it. But feel your fear and do it anyways. I'm like, I love that. It's our new mantra.
That's great. Yes.
For sure. Let's talk about fears we have in our families. Again, I mean, we should probably just have a once a month episode on just fear and really dive into these because fears we have in our families could really be its own episode.
Month-long series.
With my family, and I'm going to just going to talk about like my immediate family. My biggest fears are, is everyone happy? Who needs me? Am I meeting those needs? And then a side one that's always in the back of my head, I think because I hear so much about it now, I don't know if it always was so common, but my fear is estranged relationships. Like it seems like every other day I get on Facebook, and not really necessarily people I know, but like some groups that I'm in, and it'll be like, oh, my daughter hasn't talked to me in 3 years. Should I still put her Christmas stocking out? It's like,
yes.
Oh my goodness, all these estranged relationships. It's not just like one or two. I read about them all the time and they really do put fear into me. So I don't know. That's a lot of fears.
Right. Oh, I'm right there. That's my biggest one with having 2 adult children, 2 more on the way, is eventually getting cut off by somebody. Like I'm going to say the wrong thing at some point. Like, we talked about being misunderstood. I don't want to live in fear with my adult children or, like when we start to have grandchildren, like I'm going to do something wrong. I just know it. And I'm like, please just don't cut me off. I mean, that's how I feel because I see it too, Marie. I see it all the time and it does scare me. The other fear that I have is also very genuine, but our families live a really long way away from us. And my parents and my mother-in-law are only getting older. And I'm concerned about them aging and that I'm not there, like to help. Thankfully, my mom and I had a conversation the last time her and my dad were visiting. And I told her, I said, I want to be the person to like take you guys to doctor's appointments. And I want you to tell me if things are going on. They typically are just, kind of keep things close to their chest. And I'm like, I get that because I got it from you. That's how I am. But I mean, I know that they're aging and also we just live a really long ways away. So it scares me.
All right. Are any of these fears echoed your by, Jennifer? Probably all of them.
All of them. All of them. The aging parents thing for sure, because I'm the only child. And I'm like, that definitely resonates. But with my, my family, my husband and children, all of those same things, I realize like my husband and I have done a lot of work and we've gotten a lot of counseling and, we are as vulnerable as we possibly can and try to be as open and humble and teach me as teachable as we possibly can. So I know I'm always learning and trying to be better, but I know I'm also creating still dysfunction. And that my kids are going to grow up with things that they will look back on that will be part of their stories that they're like, this caused this wound or this hurt. And this is where this fear and insecurity developed and that they'll need a counselor one day to process that. And we've told them we will help you pay for college, your wedding, and your counseling one day to get over what we've done. And I know that I'm doing my best, but I also know that I am wounding them and hurting them. And so I fear, what's the fear? What's the point? The fear is, will it be dysfunction and wounds that they can forgive me for and know I was doing my best? Or will it be the kind that like attaches and sticks and then they don't want to talk to me anymore? Like
Right.
which way could that swing? And I've seen, like you said, I've seen so many families where I can look and say, yeah, they acknowledge, yeah, my parents weren't perfect, but they did the best they could. And I'm like, that's so great and lovely. And then there's some where it's like they can't seem to get over that one issue or those few issues. And a boundary is what feels safer to them, a boundary between them and their parent. And I'm like, oh, Lord, please don't let that be the route my kids feel like they need to take one day, is that they need to put a boundary between me and them. You know, I hope that they will feel like I'm still a safe place and that they can come to me and they'll want to be close. But
yeah.
Oh, I have one more fear, like involving families, children. Okay, so we are all of an age that we realize that life has its ups and downs. And when I look at my children or my parents, I think there in the future, somewhere lies pain and suffering in some form or fashion. And I can't live in that fear. I really have to pray that away. But it concerns me because I know it's coming. I know it's coming for someone that I love.
That speaks into your next one that you had on your list of what I, fear, think about the future. And that same thing, like suffering is inevitable. We are all going to suffer. And I feel like part of one of my coping strategies that I've realized over the years is, and I think it was because of my parents, their divorce kind of blindsided me and came out of nowhere. And so I think sometimes what I tend to do is I play scenarios out in my head. And I think it's a way of just preparing my heart for quote unquote when it happens. And so I've thought about that and I've mulled over, down the road when my children have to experience suffering, which they will, because we all do. What will that look like? Will it be infertility? Will it be death? Will it be, death of a spouse or a child? Or will it be a terrible car accident? And I'm like, oh my gosh, you have to stop. You have to stop. I have to turn that off because I know that what I'm doing is creating and running scenarios to help me pre-process, which is probably not healthy because it hasn't. My husband would say, that hasn't happened. Why are you doing that? That hasn't even happened.
Yeah.
But I think about that. I think about that of just the suffering that they will endure and, and to continue on with what I think about the future. I think about, who will my kids marry? Will they be healthy? Will they be not just physically, but emotionally? Will they gel with our family? Will they mingle well? Will they, I want literally everyone to love each other so much and we all have so much fun together, but that's probably unrealistic. And so, like, will there be members that join our family that they're the ones we tolerate or kind of thing. So y'all can speak more into that because you're already there.
Well, luckily I haven't had any of those fears realized, but I can see how you would have. I mean, I still have 3 more to get married, so I can see how you would have those fears. I mean, so far the first 2 have been awesome, but I got 3 more. What are the odds that all 5 will be awesome? I don't know. I hope they're all awesome.
Marie, I asked the same question. What are the odds that they'll all be awesome? That's a little cynical.
I know. I think it's our way of protecting ourselves. We don't want to be like,
you don't want to be caught off guard.
Yeah, we don't want to be caught off guard. Under the what are we afraid of, I put, I'm afraid of it going too fast. Like, I want to be around to see it all. Like, I never care if we're all, this hardly ever happens, but I never care if we're all flying together. But if we're flying separately, all of a sudden I'm thinking, oh my goodness, if I die, I'm going to miss out on this or that or this or that, or I want to see so-and-so's baby, or I want to see so-and-so do this, or like, I don't want to miss it, And so I think that's my biggest fear about the future. All right, well, this is the most downer bullet point to end on. So, Mindy, you had suggested that we all talk about a Bible verse that kind of helps refute fear. So I really think we should probably, end with that before we do. I'm a fan because after this, like, downhill spiral, we need to bring people back up.
We need hope. We need encouragement. Yes.
So what Bible verse does speak and comfort you in times of fear?
I quote this often with big and little and all the things in between. Philippians 4, 6, and 7. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, with prayer and petition and with thanksgiving, make your requests known to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Those verses are all encompassing and have tremendously encouraging to me over years and years and days and days.
That was literally one of the ones I thought about bringing up, Mindy, because I was looking over like my journal to see what verses I've written recently, and I think I've copied that one like several times in the past couple months.
That's why I went first, because it is very popular.
No, but it's a good one for sure.
Yeah.
Yes. All right, Jennifer, what did you have?
I might take one of your other ones.
Okay.
2 Timothy 1:7. For God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and self-control. And I love this one because God did not give us the spirit of fear. So if we're recognizing the spirit of fear, and we are humble enough to admit that's what it is a spirit of fear, then we know that's not of God. And we can, well, the next part of the verse says he's given us power. And so with that power and that authority that the Bible says we have, we can speak back into that fear, which isn't from God. It's from our enemy, our adversary. And we can speak back into that and we know that Jesus himself fought temptation with scripture. He just quoted that scripture right back to Satan when he was tempted. And so we have that authority. And then I love, it says, so in the King James Version, it says a sound mind. God has given us a sound mind. But in like ESV, NIV, it said self-control, self-discipline. And I thought that's so interesting that sound mind is equated with self-control and self-discipline. And so I feel like when we are sensing that we have fear, we take that power, and with discipline, if we have the discipline to use that power to speak back into it, then it gives us that sound mind, that the self-control is the sound mind. And so the self-control is not fantasizing, like I just said I will sometimes do. It's not chasing down those thoughts. It's not playing out those scenarios. It's saying no, no, no. When you see your mind going down that path, you say no. And it's the self-control that causes you to say no, but the sound mind is happening at the same time when you're saying no to that spirit of fear. And then I love also just to speak into the love part, because it says that he's given us power, love, and a sound mind. 1 John 4:18 says that perfect love casts out fear. And so like the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is fear. And so I just love that 2 Timothy, 1:7, where it says that God's not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and love and a sound mind. And love, perfect love, drives out fear. So if we focus and fill ourselves with the perfect love for God, for others, and, theory, we will not live by a spirit of fear. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it's a battle, but I think, to speak the word of God back to ourselves will help us with that sound mind, using that power and authority. Mm-hmm. And then that perfect love will drive out that fear. Mm-hmm. Sounds easy enough, right?
Amen.
Yeah, I mean, it's something
no big deal. Let's get right on that.
Really keep doing that over and over again.
all day long.
Yeah. Mine is a kind of a short one, and it's written in different places in the Bible. And of course, I couldn't think of chapter and verse, but I basically just typed it in, and this one came up. But I know it's in other places, Genesis, and it's in the New Testament. But basically, here's one, Jeremiah 32:27. I am the Lord, the God of all mankind. And this is the part that I have to say to myself, is anything too hard for me? Because as a control freak or somebody that might be fearful, a lot of things are too hard for me. But is anything too hard for God? Mm-hmm. No. And that is who I need to be putting. My fears are not ruffling him. He already knows. He already has it planned out. He already has the answer. It's too hard for me, but it's not too hard for him. So that's how I have to comfort myself. But hopefully these verses are comforting to you listeners. And hopefully these fears that we've had have been something that you can relate to. And also they've been encouraging that you're not alone. Because none of us are alone in our fears. We always think that we're the only one thinking this way, and we really, really aren't. But we'd love for you to contact us this week. You can find us on Instagram at Midlife Matters Podcast, or you can email us at midlifematterspodcast@gmail.com. But before we go, we want to do I'm a Fan. Jennifer, why don't you kick us off? What are you a fan of this week?
Okay, so I am a fan. I got this for my daughter for Christmas to stick in her stocking. And so my oldest daughter is a journaler and she journals a lot. My middle daughter, not so much. And I want her to be more of a journaler. I was not a journaler. Can't get that out anymore. I've said it too many times. And I wish I was better at it. And so I do think it's a habit to cultivate. It's easier the earlier you cultivate. So I got her this book. It's called, have you ever seen those 5-year journals where it's like each page has 5 lines, like it says the year, and then you just write something on that day? Like it might say, November 1st, and then there's 5 years. And then so every November 1st, you go and write something.
That's kind of cool. No, I haven't seen that. I like that idea though.
That's called 1 line a day. They have 1 line a day, 5-year journals. And
that makes sense.
That felt a little daunting because how do you narrow it down to 1 line?
That would overwhelm me.
Yeah. So you might like this. So what I got her is 1 question a day. And so each page has a question and then a space for you to answer each year that you revisit. And it could be a question like, can people really change? Or what did you have for lunch today? And it just gives you a prompt and it just gives you that practice of just writing something down every day. And I think the open-ended 1 line where you've got to pick something feels very daunting. But if all you have to write is what you had for lunch, and then you can go back and look 4 years later, I had a salad,
Great job, Mom. Great job.
So I got it on Amazon. It's called 1 Question a Day, the 5-year journal. And it's a personal time capsule of questions and answers. And it was $15 when I bought it. So
that's awesome. Yeah. We'll put a link to that in our show notes because you can't be the only one wanting to either get someone else into journaling or get yourself into journaling.
Right. Correct.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, Mindy, what are you a fan of?
All right. I am also a fan of something I got off Amazon. So we are in the Christmas holiday season right now, and I have multiple parties that I need to go to. So I'm going to spotlight one particular item that I got on Amazon, but also say I got all of our tacky Christmas party stuff on Amazon as well. And literally you can find everything out there. So this particular item I love. And I opted to get a green velvet blazer.
Ooh.
Found it on Amazon. It's under $50. I love how it fits.
You are a blazer girl. I have always known you to be a blazer girl.
I love the preppiness of it. Also, it's so versatile, and I'm tall, so I can
you pull it off well.
My frame just kind of carries it. Okay, so here I am with the green velvet blazer. I didn't have one of those already.
Nice.
So cute.
It's called Happy Sailed Women's Velvet Blazer. And literally they have every color under the sun. So I link with you guys. And that'll be in the show notes.
Yes, we'll definitely put a link to that. I want to see a picture of a green velvet blazer. All right. I'm also a fan of something on Amazon. I've had to be getting some curtains, and I just decided to, because I don't know exactly what's popular. So what I did was kind of Google bloggers that are younger than me, 20s, 30s, and then see what kind of curtains they're recommending. And then go and find them on Amazon just to get an idea of what they like. And then, you can also go down the path of say you just look on Anthropology at their popular curtains, and then you can just type in Anthropology dupes and you can find them on Amazon, much cheaper. And so I got some beautiful blue velvet curtains, blackout curtains for my bedroom. And they were by the company Half Price Drapes on Amazon. And they were already, I guess they sell things half price, hence their name. But then they had been returned to Amazon. And so then I got them even half off of that. So they were 108-inch velvet blackout panels for $25 each. I mean, they're just unbelievable prices. And then I got some great black toile curtains for my dining room recently. And those ended up being like, I think they were $25 a pair. And they're 108 inches and they ironed up beautifully. And I love how they look. And then also in the blogs, you can find out how they're really hanging these, because what I ended up doing was buying drapery rods and then like these rings, and then not with clip-on, but they are something that my mom said they used to use when she was like early married. I don't know, they're like a little pin. So you don't really see the pin. It's like a drapery pin that hooks onto the ring, and it just really elevates the look of the curtain. It makes them slide nicely. So anyways, you can really find some great curtains on Amazon. I mean, they've got a plethora of choices. I sent my mother, she's moving, I sent her a pair that I thought she should get for her bedroom, like a different kind. Like there's just so many. There's a ton. So I encourage you to look.
I speaking about fear, curtains, I've always kind of feared curtains, that I'm going to do them wrong. I'm not going to hang them high enough, or they're not going to puddle on the floor the way they're supposed to.
Right.
Do you keep them open? Do you use them and actually close? I've always been intimidated by curtains.
Is the rod going to fall out of the wall? Like,
Well,
I have
use
a shower
anchors
curtain on the floor right now because it fell down.
Always want to use an anchor for your rod.
Good.
And then I find these drapery pins to be very forgiving. Like there's no way that I could get everything perfectly even though we were measuring, but the drapery pin allows you to pin it up a little higher, pin it down a little lower, so you can get them all even at the bottom, because it's not like, okay, well, that's where I hung it and that's where the curtain has to stay.
Interesting.
So that
Good to
gives
know.
you a little wiggle room.
Wow.
Listen, you may not do stakes or parallel parking, girl, but you can do curtain.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing your fears today. I appreciate you guys both being vulnerable, and I hope listeners, you enjoyed it too.
Yeah, this has been great. Thank you.
Okay, we'll talk to you next week.
Sounds great.
Bye. We're so happy you joined us today. You can find the show notes for this episode at midlifematterspodcast.com. Also, please tell a friend about the show and help them hit the free subscribe button on their favorite podcast app. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Midlife Matters Podcast. That's where we post pictures and stories about all the things we talk about in each episode. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.